All right, here we are again. Day 9,427 of the Trump presidency. And anyway, here is the current status. Now, I've got the primer on, the white primer, and still I wasn't real happy with the surface. And primarily the fuselage is fine. I tend to spend more time on that than anything else, simply because it's the first thing I build, and so I try to get it as cleanly surfaced as I can before I begin working on the other components of the airframe, the wings and the tail and virtually anything else. I do the fuselage first. But what happens is, as I'm working on other parts of the airplane, I go back to the fuselage and continue to sand and polish the fuselage. And so because it gets the most work, it tends to be the most finished. And then also what tends to happen, human nature and all things being equal, and me being relatively undisciplined for someone who tends to, or I guess, pretends to be disciplined and patient. I get impatient, and I don't devote the same kind of time. Actually, I don't. I guess I don't. What am I trying to say here? Well, the rest of the airplane, the follow-on components to the fuselage, don't get the attention that the fuselage gets, and I speed things up, and no, not necessarily speed things up, but I just don't, because there's nothing else to work on. I don't find myself going back to the wings and going over and over the tail like I do with the fuselage, which is just the way it is. So after saying all of that, which doesn't really amount to much, this is where we are. So I've got the primer on. This is the white primer. I didn't even use the gray primer. I just went straight to the white primer, thinking that I was a little further along than I was. But even with white primer, I could see the finish on the wing surfaces wasn't where I wanted it to be, and that's on the top and the underside of both wings, and on the top and underside of the horizontal stabilizer. That was the last part that I fabricated, so that it makes sense that it would not have the same level of preparation as the other components. But even with that, the wings weren't where I really wanted them to be, or where I thought they were. So anyway, so this is a wet application, and what I do with this to get this on here, I don't know if you can pick up the swirls, but I call it finger painting or cake frosting. It's literally taking the tub of spackle material, putting an amount of it onto my finger, not too much, dipping that thing into the water, and then with that now wet milieu of spackle and water, I just rub it into the wood grain and rub it into the surface. And any places where you might see there's a void where a wing rib is, or some other void, I just lay the paste on a little thicker and swipe it across the top instead of rubbing it in. And that leaves enough of the spackle paste in that position to then fill. Typically, that usually works. Now, I may only need to do this one application here, but typically when it's like this, it takes two applications like this to fix it. And so that's what I'm looking at. And usually, if I think long, then I don't get frustrated. I'm going to expect to have to do this twice, rather than hope to only have to do it once and then be either dissatisfied and proceed anyway, or be frustrated that I have to do it again, and that might affect, I guess, my method or my performance in doing it again, and I don't want that. So anyway, these are all the things that go on in my head, which is my own thing to deal with. You don't have to listen to this noise. If you want to just turn the sound off as you're watching the videos, if this is disconcerting, as disconcerting to you as it is to me. Anyway, all right, so having to be careful not to fill in, and I've gone and drilled out the holes for the rigging. I don't know if you can see them here on the wing. Let me look and see what you can see. So the 2 holes here, 2 in the upper mid fuselage. Again, I didn't really touch the fuselage. This is all about the wings and horizontal tail surface that I found needed touch up. And then there have been holes drilled in the main landing gear, the secondary landing gear fairing down here. So those have been drilled out, and then the holes up under the wing have been drilled out. And I'll probably have to locate them again and drill them out again. I try to do that as I go along, but sometimes I miss them, or they get filled in after I cleared them out, and then you just want to go around to each of the wing strut positions and just clean them out. And usually just a piece of 16 square material can clean that out while it's still wet. If you can still chip it out if it dries. You just use your X-Acto blade and recut the corners, but you know, it's a lot easier to do it while it's wet with the stringer material. I can see a few places here where I probably want to touch up, and I think one of them is right here along this area. And then since I want them to be equal, to have the same contours, I'll do both sides. But I think at this point what I'll do is, instead of filling that now while this is still wet, I'll sand this all completely and then treat this area as a separate step, and we'll get that going after the fact. So for right now, and this helps me keep it clear in my head what needs to be sanded when this is dry. You know, the worst thing to do, or one of the things you don't want to do, is miss a spot after the fact, have a clump of spackle laying somewhere on the airplane as you start putting the final paint coat on. You don't want that. So all right, so what happens after this? Well, if this one step is enough, and I don't think it will be, it'll be at least 2 steps. So 2 more applications of wet filler and sanding. After that, what I'll do is polish it and polish the whole airplane again with the 400 grit. And then I'll lay on another coat of the sand and seal overall, and that'll cure the spackle and harden it. And then that'll be sanded off, sanded down. And at that point, I'll be ready then to just start spraying final colors. There'll be no need to re-primer. The white is going to show through the clear, and it's going to, obviously the spackle is white. So my base undercoat, my primer undercoat is intact and will be even after this process. I'm not going to sand through the paint. In fact, now that the white paint is on there, it's going to help me determine where, as I'm sanding, where those high spots were. When I start seeing balsa, I'll know those are the high spots, and where I see white paint, I'll know that that's where I can sand down to, if that makes sense. So it tells me where to go. And if I do sand into the balsa, the clear coat, the sand and seal that I put on over the top to seal that will prevent any variances in the color paint, the pigmented paint, as I put that on. So primer stage is done. This is the final filling and sanding, prep for paint. Then the sand and seal product will go on overall to seal everything and give it one continuous sort of base coat or undercoating. And then the pigments can go on. So what I think I've settled on here is we're going to do the yellow wings, and again they're going to be panels. So it'll be the left wing, the delineation will be just inside of or just below the attachment here, the angle, the gull wing right there on both sides. So we have 2 separate yellow panels. I've seen in some cases where they actually conjoin the yellow all the way down and do the top of the fuselage in yellow. There's one paint scheme that featured that, but I'm not doing that. So left and right panel, the delineation not above the radius here, but below it, just below it, to include that radius in the yellow. All right, then the undersurface of the upper wing will be silver, the upper and lower surface of the lower wings, silver. The overall fuselage gold gray. It's a light gray. The waistband, the wing stripes, and the cowling will be white. The bell, the engine bell covering, this component may be yellow, but I'm leaning towards white. If I decide to do this yellow, then the stripes will be yellow. The wing stripes will be yellow, and the waistband will be yellow. So I'm still banging that around, but I'm leaning towards white. If it's yellow, then there will be a yellow ringlet stripe around the forward fuselage, the nose section here, about a 3/8 of an inch wide, and then beyond that a 1/16 inch white. So if we do yellow, we're doing yellow bordered with white. So the wing stripes would be a wider strip of white with a center strip of yellow. Same with the waistband, a white stripe wider than the yellow stripe, and then so a 1/16th reveal of white on either side. And again, that could go it could be white and yellow, or it could be red and yellow, with the main stripe being yellow and then the two bands outside of the yellow being red. And again, they wouldn't be any more than a 1/16th of an inch in width, the accent stripes around the waistband and wing stripe. I don't know if I'm describing that right, but those are the options: either white or red banded, either white or yellow stripes. How's that? Maybe that made sense. Okay. This part, the cowling, will absolutely be white. Okay. This will either be white or yellow, and the stripes will either be white or yellow. And if they're white or yellow, then they may be bordered with either red or white. Okay. That was crazy. I hope I don't ever have to try and describe that again. You'll see what I mean when I start painting. In the meantime, this has to cure, and I'm probably going to let this cure overnight, and then sand it and see where we sit. But I'm expecting it to take 2 coats. I don't have anywhere else to be tomorrow. This is our weekend. I'm in the middle of a Saturday afternoon here, so this is the weekend, and I can dedicate some time. So we'll let this cure overnight, and then in the morning I'll sand it and see where we're at, and then at that point make a determination. I'm thinking, well, I definitely have to redo this area in here. So there's that, and then after that, it would be sealing it with this stuff, and this needs a full day to cure. This takes 24 hours to fully cure before I can put tape and peel tape, put tape on and peel it off as masking tape. And this will have to be masked, so it'll have to be cured enough to where I can do that without lifting anything off, and that means this is 24 hours. So it'll be Monday, Tuesday before I can really start laying color onto the airplane, and that's optimistic. I mean, that it could end up being all the way into next weekend before before all of the painting is done, and then there's still decaling and clear coating and rigging. Rigging looks a little bit more promising than it did last night, and the reason I say that is when I started checking the lines and where the paths of these rigging lines, I could see that I may not have to notch the gear and the wing after all. I may have enough room to just slide past these 2 obstructions and attach to the fairing without any deflections, which would be awesome. I don't want to have to cut into the airplane now. It was going to be problematic either way, but I'm hoping at this point now that I won't have to actually do it. I can just fake it, which is fine for me. I don't want to try to slice into this aluminum after the fact, just to get the rigging done, and I don't think I have to at this point, so that's great. That's a win. Right, so the wheel cover caps turned out pretty good. That's with the coat of just the primer white. They'll get their insignia white final. These will be white. You can see that looks okay, right? The caps, they turned out pretty good. Came out smooth. Oops, I'm dropping them, so that's good. And our tail wheel now has paint on it, so I'll paint the hub either white or silver. Haven't decided yet. Probably white. That's our tail wheel, and the headrest is up here. I need to work on that. This is I painted the sight. It was gunmetal or black on all the examples that I could find, so that's going to go right here, inserted into the airplane. And then I haven't painted the skyhook yet, but that's going to be the body color. That'll be the gray color when it's installed, prior to installation. So it'll be finished and painted and everything. All of the control line to it will be assembled to it. That'll be done after paint, because that's probably going to be a natural metal looking rig. So there's that. I'm thinking and I'm thinking, and I don't know if there's anything else I need to talk about. I could probably touch this up right here. I see that now. There's a little bit of a corner there that doesn't need to be there. So all in all, it came out really kind of what I expected. The wings were not quite as finished as I thought they were, but overall, we're still in good shape. And this is not, in other words, this is an anticipated step to get the primer on, and because what I like to do is use the primer to be able to see how it would look when painted, and that's really what it's for. It's to seal the wood, it's to seal the wood grain, but it's also you do the primer to see what it's like a practice run of paint. What is it going to look like when painted? And you can't really tell when it's natural wood, but once you get paint on there, then you can start to see where there's voids, where there's chinks in the armor, where there's problems that you might not have seen otherwise. So this is an expected, anticipated step. We got the primer on. We were not going to go straight to paint. It was an inspection point, and the inspection showed that we needed more work, and that's what I've done here. And it may take, as I said, it may take 2 applications like this. I'm prepared to do that. You have to, always when you're modeling, you have to, prepare to take extra time. Things may not be going as smoothly as you think, or